Good evening. I'd like to call to order this regular town council meeting for Tuesday, August 20th, 2019. Please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein.
Here.
Laffin.
Here.
Letourneau.
Here.
Marone.
Here.
Morgenstein.
Here.
Shortell.
Here.
Testa.
Here.
Zandri.
Here.
And Chairman Cerrone.
Here. Thank you. On to the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve or accept consent agenda items A through Q.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion passes. On to item 4. Oh, I'm sorry. There are no items removed from the consent agenda. On to item 5, public question and answer. Mr. Gross.
Good evening, Attorney Cerrone. Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. I have a question, probably through the chair to the mayor.
Mike is
Oh, Mike's not on?
Now you're live.
Okay, sorry about that. Through the chair to the mayor.
Yes.
Say Mike as always.
No,
There
it's
we go. On the roads that are being done around town, is the town paying cash for those, or are they bonding them right now?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your...
Yeah. I don't know what to...
Try the other mic.
Yeah, it's right in my... you want me to... You can hear? That's same voice I always have. I'll go over
Set just for you, Bob. Set just for you.
here. Yeah, so, can you hear now? No?
Yes.
Okay. The bonding, the roads that are being done right now, are they being bonded, or are we paying cash for them?
I really don't know. Some of the money may be from money that was budgeted a previous year in cap and non, or other funds. So offhand, I can't tell you right now.
Sorry. The reason I ask that is because right now we're in the lowest bond ratings, or bond rates that we could ever see. And if we're not borrowing to do, because, let me step one step back. You're probably going to do community pool in the near future. And you're going to bond for that, I would assume. Or pay cash. You're going to bond for it?
No judgments have been made about that at this point.
Well, say it's $8 million, you might. So the idea is, and this is, because you can't bond for it now. You can't go out to the marketplace and borrow money at 2% or 1.7% right now. You can't do that. Or can you? And put the money away.
I don't think you can go out now. You have to spend it within a certain period of time, or I believe there are arbitrage rules that are a penalty against any interest you would earn on it. So you can't wait. You can't borrow money and then collect interest on it over a period of time.
Because wouldn't it be wiser then to at least, well, I don't know what that means, because you're saying we can't have any money that we bond for and it can't sit anywhere for a short period of time?
Well, you're saying it's a short period of time. If it's a short period of time, fine, but there are strict rules on that. I don't know that you can go into 2 years. You have to have a project that you're going to be doing. If it appears that you're just borrowing money to make interest on it, and
I wouldn't say to make interest. I would say if you borrowed money now and you had projects you can put it towards, even if you start to pay it off over a 20, 30-year period, the money's there, you had the cash, you could pay that off, but that gives you the ability to have money in the future to pay these at a lower bond rate than you would, because these rates are historically low right now.
Well, see, most of our bonds, when we sell bonds, are for a specific project.
Right.
So if you're not going to do that project right away, you can't store the money aside until some future time.
You had Attorney Fozzie sitting here shortly, not too long ago. This doesn't work either? This doesn't work? Oh, okay. I didn't. So you had Attorney Fozzie here, you have the ability to bond for the roads of $2 million that you're doing now.
I don't believe the roads we're doing right now were part of what was in the 2020 budget, but I'm not, as I said earlier, I'm not sure what fund of money is being used to do the highway improvements.
It's something for the council or the mayor to look at. If you're gonna pay cash for something now, it might be wiser to borrow that money for now, to use it for a project that's gonna be coming up very shortly, because the rates you're getting now are the lowest that ever seen. I mean, some communities are borrowing at 1.6% right now. With bonding rates, with not a bonding rating as good as Wallingford's. Because there's not a ton of bonds out there for this type of stuff right now, and the big, they're paying for it, because rates, as you know, out of the United States are below zero. So this is what, hopefully you guys will look at it, because in the long term it will save money. Thank you. Bose isn't here.
There's a stand for that.
I have one more, unless somebody else wants to come.
You're holding the mic, you might as well take
Might as well just go on. There was, sorry, and Bose isn't here tonight, or Controller Bose, but through the mayor then, or the council, this goes to the pension fund. How, based on the last quarter, we're still going with active managed funds for a percentage of our funding. And I'm just wondering if you're going to continue to go with active, or are you going to go to passive? Because there was an article in the paper, and the headline was, Wall Street's new fad has people watching stock market scales, a way to attain mediocrity. And it goes on to say about S&P 500 funds. And it talks about indexing. It says, more often than not in the past, these achievements haven't exactly measured up, meaning what they're talking about is fads that they have done in the past. And they are considering this to be a fad, the S&P 500. And it says, over the past 8 to 10 years, in fact, more than 3/4 of the institutions that manage other people's money have had worse results than the market averages. And so the saying goes, if you can't beat them, join them. Money managers apparently figure, because they're starting to put money into 500 funds. This is the Wall Street Journal, March 21st, 1977. So this is a proven record for 40-something years now. It's up to over 80% now of the funds are. So I just don't know why the town is losing 1% or 1/4% over the long term on hundreds of millions of dollars when index proven to be the way to go.
Well, my understanding is the portfolio is diversified. You know, we have equities, we have bonds, we have some in passive and some in active. We have 3 people appointed from the outside who have sterling credentials as money managers. They do this for a living, and we have made out well. We certainly didn't lose like many others did in the 2008 crash. I think we lost something like 22%, whereas the average for everyone else was 30, 35%. So I can't fault their approach, or I certainly feel that they have a depth of knowledge about the subject. So it is diversified, and as far as I know, diversification is well accepted because you're not putting eggs mainly in one basket or another. You're taking advantage of what may happen across the board, and hopefully you see it might not be as extreme a gain as you had everything in one type of investment or one means of managing. But if you do single things out that way, you have a greater chance of losing because nothing is always going to be a plus. I mean, that's another feature that I don't think anyone sees any one way of investing as the way to do it, and you'll always be successful using that one way.
Well, for 40-plus years, passive has been the way to go. And just because it's passive, Mr. Mayor, it doesn't mean that you're in one investment. There are indexes for all different types of funds. And they can be international, they can be S&P 500, they can be the Russell 1000. But the way that they beat these is because of lower costs, number one. And number two, just you're saying you have people that are managing the fund that are from this industry. Well, I understand that. And the idea is, though, if you have people, they're perpetuating their own job in some respects, some of these people, because, I'm not saying these people are, but I'm just saying is that you have, if you were taken the way that always wins, which is indexing, I mean, it might not win every year.
No, it doesn't. You know that.
Correct. But we're not in it. We can't pick and choose a fund every year. You can't find a manager who's going to pick and choose a fund this year that's going to win versus the indexing over the long term. And we're in it for the long term.
Okay, I just want to, two things. One, our commissioners do not make any money, so it's,
I'm not
they're
saying them.
they're not getting anything from
I'm not
this.
saying, I'm talking Wall Street in general, not them.
But I mean our managers.
Correct.
The second part is, I would go to a meeting, the pension commission meets 4 times a year.
I'm aware.
Go to the meeting and express your thoughts so that they're well aware, and that's the
Yeah,
best
you
way to
guys-
handle it.
You guys have I have expressed my thoughts in those meetings, and it's just that you guys have some oversight on that also. So you're the one who picks the managers. The council has the ability to talk to them and so forth. It's just that if we're losing on $100 million or more in our equity, and we're losing 0.5% because we're picking active versus passive, it totals a lot of money in the long term. It really does. Thank you.
Any other takers? Public question, answer?
Christina Tetto. Sure. Yeah, thank you. Christina Tata, 751 North Farms Road. I just had a question on consent agenda items 3L and 3M. It just says budget amendments. Can you just give a little more detail on those?
My apologies, not off the top
sorry.
of my head.
Budget amendments for Water Division and Sewer Division totaled approximately $96,000 combined.
Yeah. Let me fish that out of the recycling.
Sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off guard there.
I think the one is the $52,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, so item L was a combination adjustment for the arbitration award for wages. There was money requested from a series of accounts to fund the wage increase. So that was L. And M's right here. And M is same thing. The wage increases that were awarded with the last arbitration. There was money moved from several accounts to fund the wage increases.
And the reason it's not in the budget is this occurred after we had adopted the 1920 budget. So it's necessary to amend the budget to provide the funds in the salary accounts.
Thank you.
Anyone else? There being none, I'll close the public question and answer period. The next item on the agenda is congratulations to the Lyman Hall Co-op hockey team winners of the CIAC Division III Boys Hockey Championship. And a presentation, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, we have the distinct pleasure of having the Lyman Hall Co-op hockey team, along with the athletic director, Steve Baker, and their coach, Dave Sagnelli, and they're seated here. I'm going to ask them to come up. They went down to the Ingalls Arena, and really, it was a fantastic, very exciting time for everyone, most of all for the players, but great success for this hockey team. So I'm going to ask athletic director and the coach if you have a few words to say, and then you're going to present the shirts to the players, and maybe if you'd like to come down, we'll shake hands. Mr. Chairman.
First, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank you for inviting us and the town council for letting us come this evening. We're actually celebrating all the kids from Lyman Hall, HK, and Cog and Chug for their championship, but I think more so we're celebrating the town of Wallingford, because it wasn't just us, it was Sheehan. Don't know how many were able to make it down the other night, but it was an incredible evening. I swear the whole town of Wallingford was there, so it was a great evening. So, but luckily for us, the trophy came home to our side of town, and we're very proud of that. Unfortunately, our coach, Rich Minnix, our head coach, has left us. He's gone to a different school to be closer to his family, which we truly understand, but we're lucky. Dave Sagnelli, our assistant coach last year, is going to be our head coach this year, and Ray Lilly's staying on as one of our assistant coaches as well, so we're very fortunate for that. And at this time, I'm actually going to hand off to Coach Sagnelli.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everyone. I was going to say everything that Steve just said, so I will keep it short. We'll just get right to the names. Let's start. First, we want to present a pair of shirts to you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you. Thank you for having our back and supporting Lyman Hall, even though it was tough between us and Sheehan, I understand. First, we'll start off with our captain from last year, Kyle Roberts. And then Travis Watrous. I think I got that right this time, finally. Assistant Captain Connor Satin. Assistant Captain, Mr. Talkative himself, Ryan Nemec. And then the assistant captain from last year is going to be our captain this year, Matt Pettit. And TJ Arduini. Matt Smith. TJ Icelib, aka Carmichael. Aiden Ware. Andrew Sacco. Ethan Zukowski? No? I'm teasing. Josiah Martinez. Taraki? Jack Roberts? Brendan Reddington?
Yeah, a little bit.
Dylan Serino? And then we'll also, hand one out to our manager. Nothing's possible without all the managers behind the scenes. So Haley?
Oh, yeah. She was behind us.
And I believe that's everyone, Mr. Mayor.
Fantastic. Everyone join in applause.
Let's look at the mayor. He was taking a picture of these guys. I said, Bill, you gotta put that on your Facebook page.
Look at his camera. He has a camera.
Yes, he does.
It's not a phone. It's a
Not a
camera.
Polaroid. We were, hey, can I show you?
Isn't it a brownie?
Hold up the flame. Oh, shucks, come on. That's Ray Lily's kid. Ray and Kathy? You know Ray and Kathy? Yeah. Yeah, that's his son. Oh, okay. Go.
You can stay.
Poor guy just hit her. What do I do?
Without the school bell, they didn't know it. All right, moving on, item 6. Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the BEW 457 Hazard Production Employees Pension Contract Tentative Agreement.
Second. Good evening, councilors. Jim Hutt, Town Human Resources Director. I'm here tonight to seek your approval on a 6-year pension agreement with IBEW 457. This is the hazard pension plan. These are the linemen and the maintenance electricians that work for the Wallingford Electric Division. The successor contract calls for a cash balance plan, pension plan for all new hires after July 1, 2019. And with that, I'll answer any of your questions.
So is this, am I correct to recall that this is the last bargaining unit that has incorporated the cash balance plan option in the pension agreement?
We've completed, beginning with the fire union back in 2015, we've This group will represent the last Mary unit in the town of Wallingford that we've negotiated a pension change for all new hires. So this is the first hazard plan that's in the cash balance plan.
Okay, and the cash balance plan is an employee self-funded retirement, is that correct?
There's an employer contribution as well.
Yep. All right, questions from the council? Councilor Zandri?
Hi.
Yes, good evening.
So just for my own understanding of it, because it's not really a 401k type plan, but they're like deferring part of their pay into this plan.
That's correct.
And there's a match similar to like what you might get with a 401k, but it's based on the percentage that they put in?
No, there's a contribution. The employer contributes 4.5%. The employee contributes 8.5% of their pay.
Do they have to do the 8.5% in order
Yes.
to get it? In order to get it, though.
That's correct.
So it kind of mirrors that.
It functions very similar to a defined contribution
Okay.
plan. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to make, because the way I was reading that kind of made sense to me that way, but I wanted to kind of
Yes,
confirm that. Okay.
that's correct.
Thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council? Questions or comments from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fishbein.
Yes.
Doesn't sound like it. Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
Yes.
Marone.
Yes.
Morgenstein.
Yes.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes.
Zandri.
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
And the motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. On to item 7.
I move we approve the abandonment of Beaumont Road, and given that the party requesting the abandonment is the same party to become the owner of the property, and the said owner will be notified of the date, time, and place for a meeting on the subject, that we only place one sign at the end of Beaumont Road.
Well, that's the notice issue. But basically, we're
But
moving
we have to approve it.
Okay.
I think we're just voting to allow the placement of one sign out there, given that the owner is located there. Parties have noticed there's no reason to need two signs at either end of the highway. There's the option under the statute to have one sign rather than two.
And so are we only acting on the sign tonight?
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So that motion was correct. Can we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mayor, tell us a little more.
Yes, this is a 575 square foot piece of property, triangular in nature. I think you have a map that illustrates its location along Beaumont Road. It's close to where the Tractor Supply store is at the current time. There was abandonment of highway, the old Colony Road in that vicinity. In 1989, this parcel was missed in the abandonment action taken at that time. And I'm told that the issue went back 20 years before that, that the town wanted to create the T intersection with Route 5. The intersection has been created, as you know. There's a traffic light there, I believe, now. No? Okay, maybe not.
Out at the roof.
Not at Route 5, at the
the other
North Main Street extension side, there is.
Okay. But there's a T intersection rather than a angled, almost a fork in the road configuration that predates that. So the issue is, in order to supply 8 Beaumont Road with town water, there's a need to run a water line, and it would cross over that piece of property. Our water division does not provide permits where a party is obtaining water and it must run through a public right-of-way. So to avoid that issue, we would abandon this piece of property and allow the property owner then, that they will have permission from Tractor Supply to an easement for running the water line. The reason for the water is a Phase 2 environmental review indicated that there was a contamination on the property and ongoing monitoring of that contamination would be necessary. The owner of the property would rather fix the problem and allow the lateral with an easement to be placed across the property and thus serve 8 Beaumont Road. So in the past, we have indicated that we would sell property. In this instance, I'm not recommending a sale because it is our rules that are requiring the conveyance to occur. That is, the water division won't allow the water line without an abandonment or a change in title. And we have one arm of government saying one thing, and then the other arm would be saying, no, we want money for it. So we need to solve the water problem, and I'm recommending that we move forward with the abandonment, which would occur, I believe, at the next meeting, or at the end of September, 30 days.
Okay. So we've moved to give notice, and the effect of giving notice is that we're effectively abandoning it if 30 days goes by without any objection or response.
No, I think we have to, they are noticed that we intend to abandon it.
Okay.
And the actual act will occur the September meeting, end of September meeting.
Got it. And so what we're doing is, if I'm understanding that we're, somehow we held on to this little triangular sliver that makes the road line kind of odd. If we abandon this parcel, the curb line will then be, or that side of the easement will continue more uniformly in line with the road.
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions from the council? Councilor Fisherman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, because it wasn't clear to me, a property with a right-of-way has a diminished value. Now abandoning this right-of-way, the property inures to the owner of the surrounding property, the underlying property. Am I to understand that as a result of this abandonment, that the taxable value of this property would increase?
That would be an assessor's question. I don't know if that will demonstrably increase the value of the piece on which Tractor Supply sits. It may, I don't know.
But it certainly wouldn't have a diminishing value.
It shouldn't diminish any value. I mean, obviously, it will be burdened by an easement for the water lateral, so that would have perhaps a limiting effect on a value to the property owner, but I'm not going to hazard a guess.
And then the other thing is the present contamination issue. This doesn't in any way, shape, or form alleviate that having to be cleaned up. It's a diversion of the water.
Well, whatever the contamination is, it was, I guess, environmental protection concern about the well that is on the 8 Beaumont Road property. Whether, I believe that this is meant to avoid continual monitoring, so it would, from what we're told, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection is satisfied with this as a measure to deal with the water issues. So I know of no other issues regarding the contamination.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Councilor Testa.
Thank you. Considering we're really here just to discuss signage, we're talking about a sign that notices the action we're going to take, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Morgenstein.
Yeah, so we're just talking about the sign, but I think having this information is useful, so when we meet next month. So I presume 8 Beaumont Road is the Tractor Supply store, is that correct?
No, I believe that's 800 North Colony. 8 Beaumont Road is a house located on Beaumont Road to the east.
Okay. So I guess my question that comes up so often with these kind of things is, you know, that's a new company, a new build. They had to go through our inland wetlands. There's water there, planning and zoning. I'm just curious what has subsequently happened that was not known when that building went up that has made this come about?
I think what occurred was that the environmental review determined that there was a contamination, and with the proximity of the well on the other property, the issue was how to deal with that as a problem. Otherwise, this really has no impact upon the site plan, as far as I know, the approval or the approval of the site plan or the construction of the building now known as Tractor Supply.
So has this home discovered the contamination? Why?
No, it was an environmental phase 2 review that was required as part of the permitting.
So even though the building had gone up and everything was moving forward, was that happening while that was still being built or after it was complete?
I believe it must have been, and ultimately there were discussions, and the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection indicated that continual monitoring of the groundwater would satisfy them as far as their concerns, and the owner of the property felt that a better resolution would be to be able to connect to the municipal water. So then they began talking with the water division, and then it was determined, no, we can't give you a permit because you don't own this piece here.
Right.
And I think that's really what revealed the piece that we're talking about, 575 square feet, and their relief is what you have before them, what you have before you.
That we were in fact the owners. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Questions, comments from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the vote?
Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Sandri,
Yes.
and Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
The motion passes.
On to item 8.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the replacement of the 1979 current cooperation pilot agreement for McKenna Court with the McKenna Court redevelopment pilot cooperative agreements.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do we have representatives from the Housing Authority?
Good evening, members of Town Council. My name is Kelly McDermott. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Authority. This is Jim Laughlin, one of our commissioners, and Roland Young, who is our General Counsel. We are here tonight requesting the replacement of our current pilot agreement at McKenna Court, specifically because we're considering a redevelopment of that particular site. It's in need of some significant renovations that will impact the health and wellness and quality of life for our 30 elderly residents that live at that site. Briefly, some of those improvements include an upgrade to our fire alarm system, the sidewalks, putting a community generator at that site, and doing some ADA enhancements to the community room and units themselves. Because that's a federal property, we're pursuing funding through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And in that process, we learned that our existing pilot agreement has some challenges that really need to be addressed in order for us to satisfy the requirements of that particular source. I can get into those details, but that's basically why we're here today. We're not really changing anything. We're really solidifying and codifying our existing agreement.
So, a little more information about why this is helpful and why that becomes necessary would be great.
In order to pursue this funding, one of the most important things is that the Housing Authority establish a single purpose entity for that transaction. That means that the Housing Authority is going to ground lease that property to an entity owned by the Housing Authority, but our existing pilot agreement is with the Housing Authority specifically and not our instrumentality or single purpose entity. So that needs to be clarified in that agreement. That's one piece of that agreement that exists. The second is that our existing agreement is very vague, and it states as budgeted by management, which means that the Housing Authority can budget whatever amount it can that fiscal year, and that's what we pay. Every other property owned by the Housing Authority has a fixed amount or a fixed pilot percentage established. Our other elderly sites have 1.9% pilot payment, and McKenna Courts is not fixed. Our lender, the U.S. government, needs stability in order to underwrite the financing. And so we're proposing to fix that pilot at 5%, which would make sense for the town and create stability for our lender. And so that's the second piece. And the third piece of this, there's three primary challenges. The third is that the existing pilot that we hold, our cooperation agreement with the town, runs with the original financing that built that site in 1980. And essentially, when that funding is paid off, there's a question on the enforceability of that agreement. And so we need to renew this in order to establish that enforceability by either party, if that makes sense.
So is that debt from 1980, is that still on the property?
No.
Okay. And
That was paid off in like 1992, I think. Yeah.
good, helpful to know.
Yes.
The 5%, is that 5% of the rent roll collected for the property?
So under state statute, the Housing Authority would pay pilot, which is a percentage of net shelter rent. That's determined by our gross rent receipts, less utility payments that we make. And that provides you our shelter rent, and we take the percentage of those rent receipts and make a pilot tax payment to the town.
Okay. Thank you. Questions from the council? Councilor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, I did reach out to you today. We just played phone tag, so I wanted to get some of this stuff out of the way before to get a little more education, but...
So it's my fault.
No, it's my fault, whatever. I'm gonna do that easily. So, why, am I to understand that the pilot payment is a result of the cooperative agreement? But for the cooperative agreement, there would be no pilot payment. Is that true?
No.
Okay, why not?
So state statute provides an exemption for housing authorities for the various types of housing that they own. The housing authority is eligible for, I think it's 3 different types of pilot payments, and the statute basically says that their property is exempt from taxation, but a municipality can essentially work with the housing authority to fix a pilot payment. So the cooperation agreement is really more of a document that sets forth your agreement over a longer period of time. But for that agreement, you would still be subject to the statutes which say the housing authority's property is exempt and you have to negotiate a pilot payment. The reason for the agreement is to give the predictability to HUD, because they won't underwrite unless they know that there's a stable, like they want to see stable income. They want to see some stable expenses. They won't commit to provide the financing that the housing authority needs without an agreement that says this is what the pilot payment is going to be for whatever length of time.
No, I understood that's sort of like the back end, just trying to work up to where we are.
You still have a pilot arrangement, but you wouldn't necessarily have an agreement for it. And some municipalities do it that way.
But it's permissive because the housing authority is exempted, but it gives the option of a deal being cut between the municipality
Correct.
and,
Right.
okay,
Correct.
so it's not mandated that there be a pilot payment. It's working together. We use services of the town, and therefore
Correct.
there's going to be a payment.
Correct.
So the current pilot payment is as a result of an agreement, or does that currently fluctuate?
No, there's an agreement that Kelly referred to that goes back to '79. That's
That's the one that's expired. That's the current cooperative agreement.
And it currently just states as budgeted by management, which when I set my annual budget, I put a dollar value in there. And that can fluctuate because there's no direction as to what that percentage should be by the housing authority. And so it's changed from year to year. You know, before fiscal year 13, it was 3 and 4%. And then we were able to successfully have enough revenue to sort of bump that to 8%. And, you know, our other properties operate under a fixed amount of 1.9%. And so the 5% number is really a reasonable estimate as to what we've been paying for the past 3 fiscal years, and also what works with the underwriting for the transaction to make those repairs at that site.
So the pilot that has been paid to the town under the present agreement, that has fluctuated. So I guess I'd have
Right.
to assume that there's stability not only for the federal government, stability for you guys, and a level of stability for us,
Yes.
at least with regard to that 5% thing.
Right.
Okay. I think the other questions, if you could just explain to me the calculation, the net shelter rent,
Sure.
what that is.
So we take our gross rent receipts for the property, and let's just say they're 200,000. We take away from that the utility bills that the Housing Authority has for electric, gas, water, sewer. It deducts that. Any vacancy loss we've experienced, it deducts that. And you get to a number that is net shelter rent. And pilot is calculated off of net shelter rent. We are always a fiscal year behind because we pay pilot off of our audited financial statements for that fiscal year. And so in May, when I made my pilot payment this year, I was paying on fiscal year 19, not my fiscal year 20, even though I was, does that make sense, even though I was in that budget?
Absolutely.
So that's sort of how the payment gets made.
Okay. And then you mentioned that you're anticipating doing a revision of McKenna Court. Would this add units, or are we rehabbing existing units? What is the plan?
It's just going to be for renovation of the existing site. That work includes, there's 3 buildings that still require new roofs. All siding on the 7 buildings on that site will be replaced, new doors, a fire alarm panel is going to be installed, some site work's going to happen. We spent a lot of time talking to the town planner's office about trying to change the visual impact that site has when you're on Quinnipiac and Washington Street. And so we've done some work around moving garbage corrals and putting some decorative landscaping in as well to sort of be a good community partner as part of the process as well. But I would say the most critical part is that we're doing some life and safety upgrades for our residents, such as the fire alarm, the generator for the community room, and then also the ADA enhancements for the elderly residents.
And that's what I was
Yeah.
mostly, because I know you have, there's a young man who comes to our meetings, and he's in a wheelchair. And I know he lives in McKenna Court, and I just, you know, as part of this rehab, I would hope that we're gonna be bringing, you know, the ADA issues up to speed.
Absolutely.
So, okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the upgrades that you're going to do in add-ons or whatever you're going to do to this location, but that will be money coming from the government. Okay, so as far as the pilot goes, will the pilot payment right now is at 1.9%?
Right now, the pilot is not fixed. Our other elderly sites that are very similar to McKenna pay 1.9%
Okay.
pilot.
So not being fixed, what is McKenna's, what are they
We've
paying?
paid so before 2013, we were paying 3 to 4%. After that, we've been paying between 7 and 8%. This year, we're paying 5%, and that's what we budgeted for next year as well, is 5%.
And that's where you want to
And
keep
that's
it at
what we're-
5%? Okay.
That's what we're requesting.
So how does that affect the renter's monthly payment at all?
No, so their rent is calculated based on what their income is, and then we hold a contract with HUD for the remaining rental payment that would bring it to our contract value. The pilot payment is an expense off of our budget. And so whatever we pay in pilot is not going into reserves or not going into improvements to the site or daily operations. It's an expense on our budget.
Okay, so it won't increase or decrease their rents?
No,
Okay, that'll stay the same.
that stays the same.
Okay, and how does that, what causes rents to go up or go down, or, how does that happen?
So, for example, recently Social Security saw a 2% increase. That could change what somebody's going to be paying in rent because they saw a 2% increase in their income.
Okay.
Other times, folks have life insurance policies, for example, that all of a sudden they can take payments off of. That's an increase in income. Or maybe their pension, they no longer receive pension payments because they've hit that threshold of age. And so that's a reduction in income. And all those things sort of impact what they pay for rent.
Okay, all right. What was the pilot that was paid last year? What was the amount? Do you have that?
It's somewhere between 24 and 25,000. I don't have that number with me.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, and that's only for this property?
Only for this property.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Zandri,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions were already answered. Thank you.
anything else from the council? Questions or comments from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Yes, it does.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And on to item 9 regarding a bid waiver for M&J Bus Company to extend services through June 20th, 2020.
Good evening.
Mr. Barone, please remind us who you are for the record.
I am Mr. Barone, Dominic Barone, Business Manager for the Board of Ed.
Thank you. What's going on here?
Okay, so we are requesting a bid waiver for M&J Bus Company because what we've been experiencing in Connecticut, and I guess across the whole country, a shortage of bus drivers, and we found that the contracted vendor we have is unable to provide all the runs or trips that we need. So at the end of, well, not the end of last year, but probably in March of last year, we were needing some runs and they couldn't provide them, so we had to reach out to a different bus company to pick up these additional runs, or the overflow, if you will. And we expect that again this year, so we are asking to be able to use M&J in addition to the CTS, which is the contractor that won the bid last year.
Oh, so this is in addition to bid services?
Correct.
Okay. And so I know you're relatively new to us.
Okay.
And I've been up here for a little while, and this is the first time this has come in front of me that I can remember. I think I heard some of it in your explanation. Is there something unique to the market for this service that happened that put us in this position?
I think it's gotten, we're outplacing a few more kids, and there's just a huge shortage of drivers, so it's become problematic, and it's not something unique to just Wallingford. As I talk to other business managers, they're a lot of the different districts are using multiple vendors, because what happens is, if one vendor's already going to a school, and they might have capacity to take another student, so it's not like, we're using as many vehicles that we're able to reach out. I initially had another idea that I need to work on a better process for, so we're not going to get to that tonight, but I mean, this is really to alleviate the problem that we know we're going to have, that the existing vendor can't supply all the runs.
And CTS is the existing vendor under the bid.
Correct.
Do you have a perception of how much we've paid them under the current contract, so for the past school year?
would have more perception that we paid about $1.4 million in private transportation, but it wasn't all to CTS. We also used Durham, which is our home school bus service, and we also used M&J.
Okay, and so Durham has a bid for the regular school bus service?
Correct, the home to school.
Okay. All right. Thank you, that was helpful. Questions from the council? Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if the original bus company that's contracted cannot provide because they don't have drivers, this other company would be used, yes?
Correct.
Okay. So the original company that can't provide, but they're under contract with us, is there a penalty to them for not being able to provide drivers where we have to go to another company?
There's no penalty, and typically what's happening too is it's a fluid situation where, we didn't know when we put out the bid for last year, we didn't know all, which schools we were gonna go to, because sometimes the kids change schools. They get outplaced at different schools. Other kids that are outplaced come back in district, and then we have new outplacement. So it's a couple things. It's also the fluidity of the situation where, we have these what are called PPTs, and somebody might get outplaced, and that could happen anytime during the year.
But doesn't, okay.
But I'm sorry, but I guess the question was really, is there a penalty, and there is not.
Okay. When does that contract, is that a year-to-year contract, or?
This is year 2 or 3.
Year 2, so you contract for a three-year period?
I believe, yeah, this was a 3-year.
Okay. That might be something to look at down the road, because, it is a contract. And I know things move within with student placement, but, that should be addressed at contract time. But the fact of, all of a sudden, well, I can't do it because I don't have the drivers, I don't think that's acceptable to where.
But just to clarify too, this would be like a new run. It's not like, once that we've established a run, they don't call us a month down the road and say, oh, we can no longer transport that student. That's not what happens. What happens is when a new person is outplaced, or if the situation changes, maybe we need to add an aide, and now the van isn't big enough for the other kids and the aides, so it's really when we're procuring the new rides.
Okay, so basically, all right, I get it now. That a new student gets outplaced, and this company, the original company, can't handle it, so you go to company 2.
Correct.
All right. It just seems like an expensive way of doing things.
We've actually, what I like to do is get quotes from several different vendors, but I don't have that in place yet.
Okay, thank you.
Process for that.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councilor Laffin.
With all those questions being answered, I'd like to move that we approve the bid waiver for M&J Bus Company to extend services through June 30th, 2020.
Second. Moved and seconded.
In the actual letter, it states the 30th.
Yes, that's a correction over what's on the agenda. Thank you. You all set? Councilor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So why can't you get quotes from different vendors to perhaps save the taxpayers some money here? You said that you want to do that. Why wouldn't you do that?
I need to lay out a process for that to be able to do it. We don't have any mechanism right now to do that from the purchasing rules as I understand them. If we would have to go out full bid, and that would be, we'd have to advertise it, it'd take a couple weeks, and sometimes we have to move quicker than that.
Okay, well, my understanding is that we're being proactive here. We haven't been informed from our current vendor that they would be unable, if another special ed student came into the district, that they would be unable to transport. I think you're being proactive here. Is that fair, or do we know that our current vendor has been exhausted?
Well, we were using both vendors at the end of last year, and we don't anticipate that the rides are gonna decrease. So I believe we're gonna need both vendors, you know, to start out the year, and we're trying to get that sorted out. And so we, you know, that's the reason for looking to be able to do this, to use M&J.
Yeah, so I get it that we haven't been informed that there's necessarily going to be a need. You're being proactive, you're planning so that you have this available to you. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
That's what I gleaned from this. Okay.
Correct, but I also think that we don't know which ones they can't do yet, but we know they're not gonna be able to do them all, because they couldn't do them all last year.
Okay.
If that clears it up.
No, and that's because, you know, in Hartford, I sit on the Public Safety Committee, and I'm aware of the problem of bus drivers. We changed a lot of stuff over the last 2 years to allow for, you know, electronic fingerprints, quicker background checks, allowing bus drivers to work, you know, before the background check totally came back. All those things have come into play, and now I'm hearing that you're projecting there's still going to be problems.
Correct.
Okay. So then, if we approve this, when would you be putting into place, getting quotes from different vendors so that perhaps you could do something different? Is that something we're gonna have to wait for next summer, or is that something you're gonna be doing over the next couple of months?
It's something I'd like to come back to you for permission to do with a plan laid out that explains how it would work and why it would make sense.
Okay, and I look forward to that discussion. You know, the current services that we have at some point went out to bid. So a document went out saying we have need for X, Y, and Z services.
Correct.
I would expect that the specifications of that bid would be the same no matter what. The only thing that would be a variable is the number of students that would be serviced. Because these are not all bus drivers, in my experience. Some of them are driving cars. Some of them are driving vans. They're not all bus drivers. So.
Correct. I mean, but they're, that is correct, but the specs, getting back to the specs, I mean, we bid out what we thought were the runs we were gonna have. And what I'm envisioning is being able to get quotes as the runs appear, so that, you know, we don't have to say, hey, we think we're going to these 17 schools, and then, you know, the 18th school was never in the RFP because we didn't know we were putting someone there. But, you know, I'm not there yet, so.
And I look forward to seeing the plan, because as you and I both know, a student who's there September 1 isn't necessarily there April 1.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you have more students on April 1.
Sure.
So it's a moving target. I look forward to a future discussion, but those are the questions that I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Testa.
We're being asked to approve a bid waiver. I fully understand the reason, and I'm good with it. But to clarify for everybody, from a financial perspective, what are the costs involved, or should I say, are the fees in the contract for this company the same as with the regular CTS contract?
They are, sometimes they're actually better.
Okay.
And that's part of, depending on which company is going, you know, if we're able to piggyback on other towns, if they're already going to a school that's somewhere, you know, in the students near us, maybe Cheshire or Meriden, we can sometimes get on that van, and now you're sending, you know, you're splitting up the cost among more students.
Well, I ask because whenever anyone sees the words bid waiver, they want to know what the cost is, and it's important to clarify that. So would you say that approving this does not result in us spending any more money?
No, yeah, I would say that. I would actually believe we'll save money.
Okay, that's important to point out. Thank you.
Councilor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. So I'll start off with Just a point of clarification, you know, my wife drives part-time for Durham Bus Services, so
Okay.
I want to make that clear, you know, as I ask my question. The other thing that I want to make clear too is I hate bid waivers. I can't stand them, because to me, I look at it like there are a time and a place for some of them, there's justification for some of the other ones, but almost to your point, and to Councilor Fishbein's point from earlier, you don't have the emergency yet. You have a contract in place, you've got a set number of routes now, you've got a student roster available, and then it becomes a moving thing. And my concern is where Councilor Testa was coming from. At what point does it become an additional cost to the town? Because a lot of the times, it's been the experience of the things that I understand is that some of these routes get broken up because there are either elements on the bus or on the van or whatever the case might be that don't meet the needs, and that's okay. If we've got a special ed student that needs very specific needs, it's fine. I also have encountered situations from other parents where they just, I don't want my kid on a bus with so-and-so, and they suddenly get their own van. So to me, that's a burden on the rest of the taxpayers. So I want a balance on that. So I'm trying to understand what is the, and I don't want to call it an emergency right now because that's maybe not being fair. Why can't this go out to bid? You guys, they must be able to know what they can handle right now, and the existing contracts and the existing agreements. Why do we need this right now for the whole year? Because this goes all the way out to the end of 2020 season, June 30th. Why do we need this now?
Well, because we're trying to get the routes laid out. When we ended school last year, between both Durham and CTS, they weren't able to provide the drivers, so we started using M&J. So I mean, while I'm trying to be proactive, I also, you know, I believe that right now, and we're trying to get all the routes laid out, that we're going to need another company.
So you already know that there's a shortage with the contracted vendor and then the other group as well.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, you know, we ended last year with it, and I don't believe it would, you know, I don't believe it's going to get any better.
Okay.
From that perspective, I believe we're going to still need, we're going to have overflow, and I'm looking for a solution.
All right, that's fair enough. I mean, it sounds like there's some homework that's been done here. I don't want to be overly critical of it. So I probably have to echo Councilor Turno's sentiment then. You know, I'm kind of hoping that as you guys enter a new agreement in the future, I mean, they're basically saying, yeah, we'll bid for these services, this is what we're willing to do. And then when they can't, and we have to take action, there ought to be a penalty involved, because they're getting their bid, they're saying, yeah, we can do X. And then if they can't even, it's one thing if we're coming back and saying we need X plus 10, but you're basically saying, this is what we're going to need for service. They're saying, yes, we can deliver that, and ultimately they can't. And I understand it's fluid, but there's got to be a plus or margin. I mean, let me take it the other way. If we suddenly consolidated a bunch of routes, they wouldn't cut our bill, would they?
Absolutely, they would.
They would or would not?
They would, sure.
All right.
Depending on which, I mean, yeah, if we had 2 vehicles going to Wheeler Clinic, and then let's just say one student leaves, and now we could put 3 kids on 1 vehicle. Sure, we would only pay for that 1 vehicle.
All right, so they're not, so that's helpful to know too. That's helpful to know, because if there's consolidation on the other side, that we would recover some expenditure, or we wouldn't expend some money there.
But, and I mean, I think that, you know, we also, with the home to school works a little differently because it's tiered, and we basically pay for the elementary school runs, and so, you know, if we were to eliminate a middle school run the way the contract was written, that wouldn't impact us. But if the elementary, which is the base run, if we were to combine them, we would have savings.
All right, fair enough. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, just because of the potential of a conflict of interest, because my wife does drive, I'm going to abstain from voting on this.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the council? Questions or comments from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Okey dokey. Fishbein.
Yes.
Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
Yes.
Marone.
Yes.
Morgenstein.
Yes.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes.
Zandria is abstaining. Chairman Savoni,
Yes.
and the motion passes.
On to item 10A.
I move we approve a bid waiver for the special education transportation through June 30th, 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. So, item B was withdrawn from this particular thing. So we only moved item A. And Mr. Brown, you look puzzled.
I thought you approved the bid waiver for M&J in item 9.
For M and J, so was that encompassed in item 10?
No, but item 10 was meant to be the ability to get the quotes. That was the process that I need to iron out before we could really.
So are you withdrawing that for consideration tonight? I thought you were only withdrawing item B from 10.
I guess I was, item 9 with the intent was to get a bid waiver so we could use M&J. I thought that's what you voted on.
We did.
Okay, so then I'd love to have the bid waiver for the special ed, but I think I need to come back and say, here's the process we're gonna use to quote, the intent was for that to deal with the ability to get quotes on each individual run.
Understood.
Sure. I withdraw my motion.
And well,
And Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure, I thought, you currently are using a particular process for placing business for special education when M&J is not able to do it. Is that correct?
When CTS is not.
What's that?
CTS, when they can't do it, we're looking to use M&J.
Right. I thought you were trying to have that continue until such time as the new process was in place.
Correct. And that's
So I think that's what was meant by 10A.
Okay.
To continue that ability to place that business as you have been doing, get an extension on the approval for that you've operated under till currently.
I thought that 9 took care of that piece, and I thought 10 would be the piece that if we had a process to bid things, that would let us, procure each ride separately with whatever vendors.
But the problem is the 10, where is it here? 9 talks about M&J, and you just mentioned a different name for placing business where the special transportation where M&J can't do it. What was the name of this?
CTS is the current vendor that won the bid.
Okay, so you don't want to extend that?
Well, that's a 3-year bid, so we're okay there. We're in year 2 of 3.
Okay.
And
so then we're set.
Okay, so then item 10A is withdrawn. Okay, and Councilor Laffin withdrew his motion.
And I'll withdraw the second.
Okay. Then Mr. Barone, we are done with you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Thanks. On to item 11, which is discussion with the police department regarding public concerns.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. William Wright, Chief of Police. Good evening, John Ventura, Deputy Police Chief.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Anything you want to say before the questions commence?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Morgenstein, this was your item.
Thank you. So thank you, gentlemen. So I had met with Chief Wright, and I just felt that bringing what we discussed to an open forum with the public would be useful. I would request, Mr. Chairman, if anyone in the public has any questions, can we entertain that?
I think our current rules permit that.
Okay, thank you. So it had been many months ago that the car break-ins, a group of the public was here. You and I also talked about businesses, public safety, your pursuit policies, use of technology. So I'll let you go, and then if I have questions, I'll ask. Thank you.
So presently in a look back over the last 6 months compared to the last, or the same period last year, we currently are running, as it relates to car thefts from vehicles, 28 or 29 complaints in the 6 months of this year, February through August. And that same period last year, there was well over 100. So it's dropped off. I can tell you that over the weekend, we had a little rash on the west side of town in Yalesville, where I think we received 6 or 7 complaints. We've had some commercial thefts overnight in the commercial district of power equipment that we're working on. But by and large, the thefts from vehicles have fallen off. The issue as it relates to pursuits, our pursuit policy is more rigid than the minimum standards that the state requires us to have. Those decisions to pursue are made in real time by both the officer and the supervisor who's working, based on any number of factors, be it the nature of the crime, weather conditions, the capabilities of the cruiser versus the capabilities of the pursued vehicle rather. You know, all that's taken into account, time of day, traffic, what we know, you know, what we don't know, in applying all of that in real time, you know, second to second, literally, whether or not the pursuit should either 1 be initiated or 2 continue. I'm sorry, Gina, if you had a third issue there.
Well, that one, I was very pleased to see your use of technology and the sergeant, like you say, the real time. I had not known that you literally, from Central Command and in the cars, can really see what's happening car to car. And I think the pursuit issue is a big one. And I think the other point that you had brought forward in that is very nice is that you feel that your force, you know, you have at this point a force that really trusts in each other, trusts in you, and you feel our community as well because of the relationship with your men, with the community, that these sorts of issues happening aren't happening just in a vacuum, and we're talking about them and we're talking with the community. And I think the pursuit policy was a big one that I wanted to be sure people were aware of, because you have busy roads, you have back roads, and it's a well thought out, it's not simply we need to catch this person. And I think that's the other point is car break-ins, activity on Route 5, all of the things and the challenges that you have in this town, have a well thought out, coordinated plan that I wanted to be sure to bring forward how appreciative I am, we are, the town is, the work you do, but also understanding the big challenges that are brought by the Route 5 corridor, the size of our town, all of that. Was there one other thing? Public safety. One of the things that actually we had not talked about that I'll ask, it had come to my attention at one point that the synagogue was having a security person standing out front. And so, of course, we know that there are things happening in this world that are quite frightening. And I'm sure that those facilities have been in touch with you as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah. Those were my big issues.
Thank you. Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, with the reduction in the car break-ins, do you attribute it to just maybe the thieves moving on to another town, or if people smartened up and started locking their cars?
I think it's probably a combination of both. We're not blind to the fact that this could jump off again tonight, right? So our midnight guys are very diligent about what they're doing when they're working, and more people are locking their cars. Yeah, we'll take that.
Yeah, that's good to hear, that people actually got the message to, to lock their cars to avoid all that.
Add real quick, the added manpower that we're able to run on midnights has been exponentially better and able to patrol the areas in the neighborhoods. It gives us and the shift commanders a better opportunity to employ different tactics that we probably couldn't do when we run a little lower. So we are definitely appreciative of the extra manpower that we can run on the midnight shift, because if you see by the numbers, it definitely has made a difference in what we're able to do in combating this.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Chief, just one last question. How is it some months ago we approved the license plate reader? What's the update on that? How's it working?
It's working very well. We had some difficulty getting the right IP address with the state so that we could get the daily downloads from their network. That's long been since solved, and I can be honest with you that there's just not enough time in a day to take action against all of the hits that LPR turns around. It's very successful.
You basically go after the serious ones?
Well, I think it's more time than anything else. I can tell you that we had an incident 10 or 12 nights ago that we're still kind of working on, so I don't want to say a lot about it, but we were looking for a specific car. So when we entered the car into the state's database, right, thereafter our LPR, we purposely put the LPR in play in that area to see if we could get a hit on the car, right? So I use that as an example of some of what we're using it for.
How many cars are equipped with it?
Just the one.
Just one? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Thank you for keeping us safe. What's the status with training of new officers? Are you having any problems? What's going on?
We are having some difficulty. And it's not really just us. I think it's everyone that needs the post academy. So we use a number of different methodologies to attract new labor. Most recently, we've been working with the Human Resources Department to recruit officers from other agencies who are either at retirement age there or for some reason are looking to leave there. We've hired 4 or 5 in that way, and it reduces the time to get the officer on the road tremendously. So the current academy is either 26 or 27 weeks in length for new recruits. We bring laterals over and give them a 6-week field training program, and then they're off and on their own. So the turnaround is much quicker. We were notified last week that the state has canceled the October basic recruit academy class. The staffing levels at the academy are such that they can no longer run 2 classes simultaneously. So simply put, one leapfrogs over the other as the year goes on, and when they're both there together, both classes, they don't have the staffing to manage 2 groups of 50, if you will. So we were getting basic recruits ready for the October class. It's my understanding as of late today that the class for the seats for the December class are already spoken for, So that puts us off until April. I don't know long-term how that's going to continue at the Post Academy without more labor. They need the help. So we've used satellite academies before. Waterbury just started one last week. We didn't take advantage of it because we were under the assumption that we were going to get recruits in October into Meriden. Milford runs a really nice satellite academy. I don't know what Chief Mello's plans are to run one. It's very expensive for him to do that. And I think he does it specifically when he has a minimum number of recruits that he needs himself, and then he'll open the remaining seats to certain agencies that he knows will provide a quality recruit from an agency that kind of has its act together, and we've been fortunate to be included in that small group. New Britain runs an academy every so often, and then both Hartford and New Haven do as well. In a meeting I was at last week, the Eastern Region chiefs were discussing amongst themselves whether they should start an academy due to the fact that trying to contain costs, the state has now made the current class that's in a commuter class, where it was primarily residential in the past. So, speaking to one of the Eastern Region chiefs, he's spending just about $1,000 a week in overtime for his officers, his recruits, 2 of them, to travel from the Eastern Region to the academy for the day and then back home at the end of the day, and he's got to pay them for all that time. So, separate from the basic recruit training, there is a lot of discussion at the state level about virtual training. We are required by state statute to provide to our officers a minimum number of recertification hours over a 3-year cycle. We do a lot of that ourselves internally here. I find that our own police officers make good trainers. They're all state certified trainers in the key core areas that we need. But that being said, it looks like the state is going to move towards a virtual training platform for these recertification hours with lesson plans endorsed and approved by the Post Academy or certainly the Post Council. That will require us here locally to take on more software platforms to be able to comply with that, right? So if they're going to offer it in a certain platform or in a certain way, we're going to have the ability to take part in that if we choose to, which will require the purchase and then thereafter maintenance of certain pieces of software. I need to do that anyway. The state now requires all police departments to comply with a certain minimum number of standards, which you may be familiar with from the last session. Because we are post accredited already, we're already complying with those standards every year anyhow, and 300 and some odd more. But that being said, we're going to be required to get onto a certain platform to allow the state to do that remotely from the academy per se, instead of traveling to each and every department. The software platform that I'm looking at that will allow us to do that will also allow us to upload all of our policies and all of our operating procedures, wherein not only will they be in one place, but we can thereafter generate tests and exams from our policies through this software so that our officers will have access to not only reading the policy, but thereafter have to take a short exam that will indicate their comprehension of what we're trying to give them. So all of that means, more expenses on the technology side of our budget, which is, you're intimately familiar, is already into the hundreds of thousands of dollars annually already. But I think it's a sign of the state's attempt to both reduce their overhead and also potentially through this virtual training make it a little bit easier and save us some money by having our officers stay home locally to have this training completed versus having to travel somewhere else for these recertification hours. There are currently 3 different work groups that are working on some amendments to the statewide pursuit policy. And I know all of that is in play with a bunch of other things. So I know that the recruit class expenses, the tuition, if you will, which is presently, I believe, $2,500 per recruit, went up last week unannounced to $4,000. So I was initially very, very concerned about that as relates to our budget, and I was going to tell you that I possibly might need to come back mid-fiscal year for a transfer, but then I'm also thinking that if these classes aren't going to run as often as they were, then it's kind of a, it's kind of a wash.
Well, do you have the ability to go to another state to have an officer trained?
No. Right now, if we were to recruit an inbound police officer from another state who's already certified, he or she would have to seek comparative compliance from the state of Connecticut, and I suspect that that would be true for us sending recruits out of state for training.
Okay, I know that some departments are hiring DREs, drug recognition experts.
Yes.
And they are being trained in Arizona, is my understanding.
Yes, so we have 2 DREs on staff in our traffic division. That program is managed locally by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. There's a 2-week training program here in Connecticut, and then they are flown out to Arizona, thus far tuition-free, cost-free, where the actual on-site training occurs in a correctional facility.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm glad we sort of got down the rabbit hole, but I got a little more education, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Councilor Xander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen. Just a quick question or two. So recently there was a theft of a couple of catalytic converters on the other side of town. Do you kind of, with the car break-ins, I don't know how you group or classify those. Those are kind of on the same tier, vandalism, theft, as a break-in in the car, or are they delineated differently?
It's delineated differently.
Okay, so
one is classified as a theft from auto, your pocketbook or some other valuable, and the catalytic converter is actually classified as a theft of an auto part.
Okay.
Which at the federal level means 2 different things.
Okay, because obviously with that being, more recent, and we haven't heard about anything like that recently, even into the past history, I kind of just wanted to throw that out there. The other thing that I kind of want to add a little bit to is almost like what you just said. There's been a drop-off, and I think sometimes what happens during a drop-off is the community, we shoot ourselves in the foot because we become complacent. Okay, things aren't as bad anymore. We're going to start, going back to our old habits of, I'm going to run in the house, I'm going to leave the car unlocked. I'm trying to remember everything from this morning I read in the Southington group. I think there was an individual in Southington, he walks his dog like at 5:30 in the morning, he got to the habit of not closing the door because he was just going to the end of the street, exercise the dog, clean up and come home, came in and there was somebody in his house. The dog went right upstairs because the dog heard something, because this guy stopped locking his door because he got comfortable again. And I don't like to be the paranoid individual and say, we always got to lock everything up and be extra vigilant and so on and so forth. But I want to remind folks that as each individual becomes more comfortable, that is basically what invites people back. Like you said, maybe they're cycling somewhere else, and then when they exhaust another area, or the other area tightens up, or the police step up more, then they come to another, they come back here, or they go elsewhere. So I kind of want to take the opportunity to remind people that you have to continue to stay vigilant on this stuff. And also, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, even the smaller things you want them to call you about, even if it's just to fill out the report, even if there's not a lot that you can do about it, because then it doesn't get, for the lack of a better way to say it, it doesn't get marked down. You don't know what you don't know. You can't say that there's been an uptick here if people stop calling. So I imagine that you want them to continue to call and report things, even if the individual thinks, oh, it's my fault, I shouldn't have left the shed unlocked and things of that nature. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. These incidents over the weekend on the west side of town, we came across a duffel bag that had numerous motor vehicle registrations in it. Some from our town, some from other towns, right? So, yes, we want our residents to call us when they think they need our service for that and other reasons.
All right, perfect. So I mean that's helpful as well, because I you know, a lot of times people are like of the mindset, this is small, I'll just lock the shed. They only took a few tools, and I don't want to bother the police department. But I keep telling them, your neighbor isn't going to find out that you had a problem if you don't speak to them. But if they maybe read it in the paper, they're like, well, I better start locking my shed, and that only gets out by communication. So that's good for, you know, me to kind of also echo when people talk to me. But again, I got to echo the other sentiment that's up there. We really appreciate the job you guys have to do. You know, you guys sign up for it, it's your careers, but I mean, it's not easy. It jumps from one thing to another, and it's multifaceted, and you're dealing with people, and you know, on top of the fact, the bad guys out there, then you got the people that have been impacted by it, they're upset too. So you guys are juggling a lot. So I want to extend my thanks to you as well. Thank you very much.
I think, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please.
I've been before you a number of times over the past few years about a lot of major projects. Kind of as an update, as you know, if you've been behind our building or down Wallace Avenue anyway, that storage building has been completed now, and it really has been a fantastic addition to our operation to get that heavy equipment out of the weather and under cover. Also, the traffic sign shop is located in that building, so now we're all really at 135 North Main Street. We are probably 70 to 75% through that multi-million-dollar radio, two-way radio upgrade. We are well ahead of where I think even Motorola thought we would be, and that is due mostly to the close working relationship that town agencies here in Wallingford share. We are up on water division equipment. We needed a lot of help from the electric division to power these new sites, and it really took Chief Highgard and I just a phone call to one of those divisions for assistance, and it really was immediate. They're running a like project in Middletown, and they're having great difficulty with Eversource powering their new sites. So I'm grateful for all of that. You approved over the last 2 years additional labor for us. As the deputy indicated, that has been instrumental with turning out on some nights 8 or 10 cars on midnights, broken up into smaller pieces in town. So we are deeply appreciative of all of that support, and I know sometimes our projects tend to linger because they are large in scope. Next week we are, the purchasing agent and I are meeting with whomever wants to attend for architects for a discussion about renovations to our building. We've been there now 35 years in continuous operation, and it's time to look at some of the critical facilities. The mayor's given us permission to seek that service, so hopefully within the next few months anyway, I might be back before you looking for a funding or revenue source for the hiring of a consultant to help us kind of blueprint out a path forward before we get into difficulty with some of our critical facilities needing absolute immediate attention. So I say all of that to say that we can't do it alone. It really is a combined effort between ourselves, our residents, our population, our business community, and certainly yourselves, which we always need a lot of help from to, you know, push the ball a little bit further down the court. So we are appreciative of that.
The one thing I can say in response to that is you make it easy. And I'll give you some examples of how or why. The improvements and upgrades and technology that you told us about, I think we're going to see the reward from that in terms of responses, the ability to deal with things on a within Wallingford global basis, to deal with the other departments, to get all the responses you need to get done, what you need to get done when things are happening incredibly quickly. You know, you talked a little bit about game time decisions. So much of what you do is responsive. I mean, everything you do is responsive on some level. The presence in the community of your department is one that I've found welcoming and encouraging. I can't tell you how many times I walk down North Main Street or drive through the center of town and see one of your patrol officers on the bicycle. And I think that's great for a whole number of reasons. You know, it gives you the opportunity to talk to teenagers and young kids. You know, it gives you the opportunity to talk to anybody because you don't have the car window closed. And I think people feel comfortable. You know, there was a time when there was a perception that seeing a police officer was something to be concerned about. And in this town, I hope people don't feel that. I certainly don't. I think you've been incredibly available to the community. I know you talk to us, you talk to me, and you let us know what we need to know to keep our constituents informed. That goes yards and yards in terms of keeping the policing game and the community comfort level where it should be. So those are some of the reasons that I can use to say, in response to your thank you, you're welcome because you make it easy. We see the results. And I certainly am grateful.
Thank you.
Were there any questions or comments from the public? Mr. Morgenstein.
Larry Morgenstein, South Main Street. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
Thank you, as always, for your service. It's been invaluable. The public feels at ease with you and the whole force. It's been a really shift in the tide, I think, in this town to relationships. I wanted to mention a few things. The first one is to echo Chairman Cervoni. The return of the officer on the bikes is a wonderful sight to see, and that's really gladdened my heart to see that back in the community. What is the scope of which area they cover and how often?
So they're covering all three shifts. I'll give the deputy chief kudos for really improving that program this year. We took advantage of some free training that Yale University was hosting for bicycle officers. It's a full 40-hour class. So patrol is riding across all three shifts, and both our community police officers are also riding during the day, and then they work some odd hours, if you will. They very rarely work a static shift, so as the weather and time allows, in their day, they're in the community as well. So we have 4 bikes. It's not often that all 4 are in use all at the same time, but I think we have 7 or 8 riders now, so somebody should be out there all the time, weather depending. Hopefully.
The next question is regarding, and I think we do have body cams for the units and the policemen as they go out.
No.
We don't have body cams.
No, we're not a body camera department. Cruiser cameras, yes, not body cameras.
So we have some ability to record the interactions, but...
Yes.
And...
So let me just be clear that although the incident, if you will, or the interaction might not be captured on video, it's very often captured on audio because the officer will initiate the body-worn recorder, audio recorder, when he or she leaves the car. So you may get a straight video shot of the car pointing down the street wherever it's parked, but the audio is being recorded as the officer goes about his or her business.
Now, I know that the concern with the body cams and them coming back has been twofold. I mean, one is to protect the people that the police force interact with, but it's also to protect our officers too in their interactions so that we can see for their well-being or both sides' well-being what the interaction is like. In your estimation, is that something that we should have? Are we leaving ourselves open?
Well, I don't know that we're leaving ourselves open. We could talk about probabilities and possibilities for the next several hours. It's my understanding internally myself that it will eventually become an item or piece of equipment that we will have. There was a lot of reimbursement money available over the last few years for departments to jump on to body-worn cameras. We hesitated only for the aspect of nothing is ever really free. So the storage costs, if you were doing that remotely, were extraordinarily expensive. And as I imagined through discussions with some of my peers, the costs have come way down on both storage, whether you do it locally or virtually to another location, and also the cost of the hardware of the camera is coming down. So I foresee that in the near future we more than likely will transition to body-worn cameras. I think our officers would be welcome to that. But I also say at the same time, and where I talk about probabilities and possibilities, we're not having a problem. But anything could jump off at any time, as we know, from just what we see from captured recordings already that make it to into the public through the world news, as an example. So I'm not afraid of the technology. I believe the costs are coming to a point where they're more reasonable. I didn't want to necessarily take the state's reimbursement money and jump on just because they were offering it. And I think you may look at that as being kind of nearsighted, but we had a lot of discussion internally about it. I would say that in this area we're probably one of the only agencies that aren't wearing body-worn cameras. But that was the decision I made. We haven't been harmed by my decision. But I foresee the day where, yes, we will be an agency that is equipped with body-worn cameras.
Yeah, and again, that's a difficult decision, and it works twofold. It's to protect both sides, and I think it's important that you folks are adequately protected and the public is protected. The last thing I want to address, which I think is the most complicated and sad, is that we're living in a world right now where daily we hear about mass shootings and tragedies taking lives in our community. We've been dealing with our schools where parents have been afraid for their children's safety. We had El Paso take place. We have, as Councilor Morgenstein, my wife, talked about, our own synagogue has felt the need after Pittsburgh to hire an armed guard. And now I'm concerned for our Hispanic community, that in El Paso they were specifically targeted for just being who they are. And that's something that, unfortunately, we don't live in a bubble that will protect Wallingford any more than any other community. As a community leader, part of why I'm hopeful that you're up here tonight is that, can you make some sort of statement as a leader to those communities that might be looking over their shoulders, that and what you as a police chief and your force are doing to assure those communities, whether they be Black, Islamic, Jewish, Catholic, whatever, or Black, white, what you might want to say to this community tonight in this world that we live in.
So, to Chairman Cervone's point, I think our community here knows us, and excuse me for my back to your...
No, that's okay. No offense taken.
I believe that our community knows us. I think that we are very approachable. I think that there are some concerns in some places about police transparency. I can tell you that I feel from my time I spend in our community that that's not present here. We are very open with what we do. We can't talk about a lot of things a lot of the time because it impacts our ability to investigate crime as it's occurring. but that's not for any other reason than just that. And I'm hopeful, Larry, that our community and all its members and all its demographics are or have some comfort in the fact that we are a well-trained, ethical, highly proactive department. And I think that's true about the fire service as well when we talk about first responders. It was a watershed moment this past spring when we did a week's worth of training with cooperation from the Board of Ed at some of the schools regarding active shooters, and it didn't necessarily mean just for an active shooter inside of a school, but generally in a large building. When the fire service in this town is willing to now come into a warm zone with us to start or continue basic first aid that maybe we've initiated in what moments before could have been a hot zone, right, where it's very dangerous, I think reflects on the commitment that this community has for all its members. But I can't sit here, nor will I ever sit here and promise that I can protect everyone. I can't make that statement. We try pretty hard. I think we're really good at what we do, if I may boast a little bit. We hire good people. We train them correctly and appropriately. I think it can't be lost that law enforcement officers themselves individually act with a lot of autonomy where there's a lot of regulation and a pretty clear, bright box that they work in, whether we create the box or the legislature does for us. They still operate with a lot of autonomy. And it's comforting to me that when they turn themselves out at the top of the hour, when they turn out the watch every 8 hours, that they are well trained, that they have the best of equipment that I can possibly provide to them. And I hope that as they go about their business, and I'm confident that I can say this, that they're doing the very best they can. We often talk about we don't expect perfection out of ourselves or the people that work for the police department. We expect effort. And as long as everyone is trying, as long as everyone concentrate on what their scope of the mission is, so far that's paid off for us. So if I had to say anything to our community, I would expect and hope that they have confidence in us, that we are well-intentioned and ethical, hard-working people, but not perfect, just hard-working with a lot of effort.
I think you can also say that the department has, in the past, where a people, congregation, organization is concerned, supplied an officer to talk about what can be done to make things safe and the protocols. Is that correct?
That's correct. So recently, to your point, Larry, about the synagogue, we hosted, if you will, a meeting here locally in one of our religious facilities to try to quell some of the fears, to try to quell some of the concern. And I think we, by and large, were successful that day. But we're not blind to the fact that there's a lot of angst in our community about these things. It keeps me up at night, to be honest with you. But, I don't for a second doubt that our ability to handle something should it jump off like that. I'm hopeful we put our officers in the best position to go ahead and to do that. So we do a lot of instruction, to the mayor's point. We provide a lot of education to both private groups and civic groups should they request it. We teach a certain model of response, and that's worked well for us. And I think, to my point earlier, if the community is in need of something, or a group, to your point, is in need of something, they certainly should know that we're available to them.
So I want to thank you again for your service, your availability. I have no doubt that what you say is what you practice. I think you and your staff have proven that you are an asset to this whole community, and that we are safer for the work that you guys do. I also just think it's so important that, given the events of this world, that we have leaders that speak and not stay silent after these things happen, because we do need reassurance from our leaders. We need people that are willing to speak when the times demand that people speak and not be silent. So again, I thank you and your force for the service that you do, and for your words tonight. I hope that people will hear those words. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Thank you for your chief, deputy chief, for your willingness to come here tonight and share your experience and wisdom with us, and provide comfort. So, thank you very much. With there being no further business on the agenda, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, meeting's over.